It started as an ordinary day on the busy streets of the city. The hustle and bustle of people rushing to work, shopping, or heading to meetings filled the air. Near the entrance of an upscale apartment building, a young boy stood with a small box of candy in his hands. He wasn't loitering or begging. He was simply trying to sell his candy to earn a bit of extra money. The boy, dressed in simple but clean clothes, had a polite smile on his face as he approached passersby, offering his goods in a soft-spoken but confident voice. The building behind him, a towering symbol of luxury, was owned by a wealthy woman who prided herself on maintaining an air of exclusivity around her property. Known in the area for her arrogance and controlling nature, she was the type of person who believed the world revolved around her. To her, anyone who didn't fit her image of sophistication was an eyesore, and the boy selling candy on the sidewalk was no exception. When the woman spotted him near the entrance, she felt her blood boil. How dare he set up here, she thought. To her, the boy's presence was an affront to the image she worked so hard to cultivate. Without giving it a second thought, she marched toward him, determined to remove what she saw as a nuisance. What began as a simple confrontation would soon escalate into an unforgettable moment of reckoning. While the woman dismissed the boy as insignificant, she had no idea who he was or what he was capable of. The events that followed would not only leave her stunned, but would also serve as a powerful lesson about kindness, persistence, and the unpredictable turns of life. The wealthy woman, Margaret Stone, was known throughout the neighborhood as a force to be reckoned with. She owned several high-end properties, including the gleaming building in question, which she had turned into one of the most exclusive addresses in the city. To Margaret, appearances were everything, from the pristine lobby to the carefully curated landscaping outside. Every detail of the property reflected her obsession with maintaining an image of perfection. Margaret wasn't just wealthy, she was entitled. She viewed her wealth as a badge of superiority, one that placed her above others. This sense of entitlement shaped how she treated people, especially those she perceived as beneath her. Margaret had a habit of dismissing service workers, avoiding eye contact with people she deemed irrelevant, and even calling security on anyone who lingered too long near her properties. For Margaret, the world was divided into two types of people, those who belonged in her circle of privilege and those who didn't. And the boy selling candy outside her building clearly fell into the latter category. To her, he was an unwelcome intruder, a stain on the polished image she worked so hard to maintain. Margaret's arrogance blinded her to the humanity of others. She didn't see the boy as a resourceful entrepreneur or a hardworking individual trying to better his circumstances. All she saw was someone disrupting the luxury aura of her building. Her dismissive attitude wasn't new, but in this case, it would have consequences she could never have anticipated. The boy, whose name was Jordan, couldn't have been more different from Margaret. At just 14 years old, he had already developed a work ethic and sense of determination that far surpassed his years. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood, Jordan had learned early on that nothing in life came easy. His family struggled to make ends meet, but they instilled in him the values of honesty, hard work, and resilience. Jordan wasn't just selling candy for pocket money, he had a vision. He dreamed of one day starting his own business, and selling candy was his first step toward achieving that goal. Every dollar he earned was carefully saved, with a portion set aside to help his family and the rest dedicated to his dream. For Jordan, each sale wasn't just a transaction, it was a small but meaningful step toward a brighter future. What set Jordan apart wasn't just his entrepreneurial spirit, it was his attitude. Despite the challenges he faced, he carried himself with dignity and kindness. He never pushed his candy on anyone and always thanked those who bought from him with genuine gratitude. While some people ignored him or brushed him off, Jordan didn't let it bother him. He understood that not everyone would support his efforts, but he refused to let negativity discourage him. On the day of the confrontation, Jordan had chosen the spot near Margaret's building because it was a busy area with plenty of foot traffic. He didn't know anything about Margaret or her reputation. He simply saw an opportunity to reach more customers. Little did he know, his decision would set off a chain of events that would change both of their lives forever. Jordan had just finished selling a box of candy to a kind passerby when he noticed a woman approaching him. At first, he thought she might be interested in buying something, so he greeted her with a friendly smile. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Would you like to buy some candy?" he asked, holding up his box. Margaret, however, had no intention of buying anything. Her expression was one of disdain as she looked Jordan up and down. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her tone sharp and accusatory. "I'm selling candy," Jordan replied politely, undeterred by her hostility. "I'm just trying to make a little money." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Not here, you're not," she snapped. "This is private property, and I won't have you loitering around my building. You're scaring away my tenants." Jordan blinked, caught off guard by her reaction. "I'm sorry if I've caused any trouble," he said. "I'm just standing on the sidewalk. I'm not bothering anyone." But Margaret wasn't interested in his explanation. To her, Jordan's mere presence was enough to justify her outrage. She crossed her arms and said, "I want you gone. Now." Margaret didn't stop at demanding Jordan leave. She escalated the situation by calling security. Within minutes, 2 uniformed guards arrived, summoned by Margaret's insistence that Jordan was disturbing the peace. Jordan, though nervous, remained calm as the guards approached him. He explained that he was simply selling candy and wasn't causing any harm. "I'm just trying to make an honest living," he said, his voice steady but respectful. One of the guards seemed sympathetic, but Margaret cut him off before he could respond. "I don't care what he's doing," she said. "I want him off this property immediately. He doesn't belong here." A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the commotion. Some onlookers voiced their support for Jordan, while others watched in silence, unsure of how to react. One woman stepped forward and said, "He's just a kid trying to work. What's the harm in letting him sell his candy?" Margaret shot her a withering look. "This is my property," she said coldly. "I have every right to decide who stays and who goes." Despite the pleas from a few sympathetic bystanders, Jordan was forced to pack up his candy and leave. As he walked away, his heart felt heavy with disappointment, but he refused to let the experience break his spirit. "I'll come back stronger," he thought to himself, and that's exactly what he did. As Jordan walked away from the confrontation, his emotions were a mix of disappointment and resolve. He felt humiliated by the way Margaret had treated him, but he wasn't the type to dwell on negativity. Instead, he made a silent promise to himself. This wouldn't be the end of his journey. If anything, it would serve as fuel for his determination to succeed. That night, Jordan sat at the kitchen table with his notebook, going over his goals. Selling candy was just the beginning. He dreamed of saving enough money to start a small business, and eventually he wanted to build something big, something that would make his family proud and prove to the world that even a boy from humble beginnings could achieve greatness. Jordan decided to double down on his efforts. Over the next few weeks, he started selling candy in different neighborhoods, avoiding areas where he might run into people like Margaret. He worked longer hours, sometimes staying out until sunset to reach more customers. He also refined his approach, learning to read people's body language and figuring out how to pitch his candy in a way that appealed to each person. His confidence grew with every sale, and so did his savings. Jordan wasn't just selling candy, he was building a foundation. He kept meticulous records of his earnings, saving every dollar he could. He researched small business ideas, watching videos and reading articles about entrepreneurship whenever he had spare time. He even started thinking about investments, imagining how he could grow his money instead of just spending it. The memory of Margaret's dismissive words stayed with him, not as a source of bitterness, but as a motivator. Every time he felt tired or discouraged, he thought about that day outside the building. One day, he told himself, "I'll show her who I am." While Jordan was focused on his goals, Margaret continued her life as usual, completely unaware of his progress. To her, the encounter had been insignificant, a minor inconvenience she had quickly forgotten. But for Jordan, it was a defining moment that pushed him to work harder than ever before. Margaret Stone moved through life with the confidence of someone who believed the world revolved around her. She had wealth, influence, and a long-standing reputation as a powerful businesswoman. To those who observed her from afar, Margaret embodied success. She owned multiple high-end properties, attended exclusive galas, and was known in elite circles for her sharp mind and ruthless business tactics. Yet beneath her polished exterior was a profound sense of entitlement and an unshakable belief that her status made her superior to others. Margaret's world was one of luxury and control. Her days were meticulously planned. breakfast at her favorite upscale cafe, meetings with her property managers to discuss maximizing profits, and evenings spent at private club gatherings where the air buzzed with idle chatter about investments and power plays. Every decision Margaret made was calculated to maintain her image as a woman who had everything together. The building where she had confronted Jordan was one of her crown jewels. Known for its pristine exterior and luxury amenities, it housed wealthy tenants who paid exorbitant rents for the privilege of living there. Margaret took pride in the building's reputation, obsessing over every detail to ensure it exuded exclusivity. From the manicured landscaping to the marble floors in the lobby, everything had to meet her exacting standards. But while the building itself was beautiful, Margaret's management style left much to be desired. She ran her properties with a focus on profit above all else, often neglecting the human element of being a landlord. Complaints about repairs were met with indifference, with Margaret often delaying fixes to cut costs. When tenants requested flexibility in rent payments during difficult times, she dismissed them without a second thought, offering curt replies like, "This is a business, not a charity." Her tenants knew better than to challenge her decisions, as Margaret rarely entertained dissent. Her interactions with those outside her circle of wealth were even colder. Service workers, delivery drivers, and anyone she considered low class barely registered in her world. To Margaret, these people were invisible at best and annoyances at worst. She didn't bother learning their names or acknowledging their efforts, viewing them as mere cogs in the machine that kept her world running smoothly. Margaret's dismissal of others wasn't always loud or overt. It often came in subtle, telling actions. She'd ignore the doorman's cheerful greetings as she walked into her building, choose not to say thank you to delivery drivers, and cross the street if she saw street vendors selling goods. Her sense of superiority was so deeply ingrained that she genuinely believed she was entitled to treat others this way. The day she confronted Jordan outside her building was just another example of her arrogance. She hadn't spared a moment to consider his perspective or what might have brought him to sell candy on the sidewalk. To her, his presence was nothing more than an inconvenience, a disruption to the image of exclusivity she worked so hard to maintain. Margaret had assumed that once she ordered him to leave, that would be the end of it. She hadn't even remembered his name. Margaret's inability to see beyond her own privilege blinded her to the possibility of change. She believed her wealth and influence made her untouchable, insulating her from the consequences of her actions. In her mind, people like Jordan, children selling candy on the street, would always stay in their place. The idea that someone she had dismissed so casually could one day rise to challenge her authority was inconceivable. However, what Margaret didn't realize was that her behavior that day had planted a seed in Jordan, a seed of determination and resolve. While she continued her routine of high society events and profit-driven decisions, Jordan was quietly working toward a future that would upend her assumptions. As time went on, Margaret's arrogance became more pronounced. She doubled down on her efforts to keep her properties exclusive, introducing stricter policies to ensure that only the right kind of tenants could live there. She believed she was untouchable, that her wealth and reputation would shield her from any challenges. But what she couldn't see was that Jordan's determination to succeed had grown into something unstoppable. Margaret's confidence in her unshakable position would eventually lead to her downfall. Her inability to recognize the potential in others, or to treat them with basic respect, had created blind spots in her otherwise calculated approach to life. She had overlooked the power of resilience, persistence, and the possibility that those she dismissed could rise far above her expectations. Margaret's actions were a cautionary tale in the making. While she moved through life with her head held high, unaware of the forces quietly gathering beneath her, Jordan was preparing for a reckoning that would turn her world upside down. Her arrogance had planted the seeds of her own lesson, a lesson she would learn when it was far too late to undo the damage she had caused. In the end, Margaret's sense of superiority wasn't just her defining trait, it was her greatest weakness. It blinded her to the humanity of those she dismissed, and it kept her from recognizing that success isn't just about power or appearances. True success, as she would later learn, is built on respect, humility, and the ability to see the value in everyone, regardless of their circumstances. And that was a lesson Jordan would teach her in the most dramatic way possible. Years passed, and Jordan's hard work began to pay off. What started as a simple candy selling operation blossomed into a series of small but successful business ventures. Jordan's first big step was investing his savings into buying bulk candy and reselling it at a higher margin, which allowed him to scale his operation. From there, he branched out into other entrepreneurial activities, such as selling snacks at local events and offering delivery services. Jordan's knack for identifying opportunities and his unrelenting work ethic caught the attention of local business owners. One day, a shop owner who had watched Jordan grow over the years offered him mentorship. Under the shop owner's guidance, Jordan learned about inventory management, customer relations, and financial planning. These skills proved invaluable as he continued to expand his ventures. As Jordan's success grew, so did his ambitions. By the time he reached his 20s, he had saved enough money to open his first small business, a convenience store in his neighborhood. The store became a community staple, known for its friendly atmosphere and Jordan's dedication to serving his customers. But Jordan didn't stop there. He reinvested his profits into more businesses, including a small chain of stores and real estate investments. His story of resilience and determination began to attract attention, earning him local media coverage and recognition as a rising entrepreneur. Through it all, Jordan never forgot where he came from. He used his growing influence to give back to his community, supporting programs for underprivileged youth and mentoring aspiring entrepreneurs. To him, success wasn't just about personal achievement, it was about lifting others up. One day, as he looked over his portfolio of businesses and investments, Jordan stumbled upon an opportunity that immediately caught his eye. The building where he had once been humiliated by Margaret was up for sale. Without hesitation, he decided to pursue it. The purchase of the building was finalized within weeks, thanks to Jordan's financial success and savvy negotiation skills. The deal was kept quiet until everything was in place, ensuring that Margaret had no idea who the new owner was. When the day came to announce the transaction, Jordan decided to deliver the news in person. Dressed sharply in a tailored suit, Jordan walked into the building that had once been the site of his humiliation. Tenants and employees glanced at him curiously, wondering who he was and why he seemed so confident. As he approached the front desk, he asked to speak with Margaret, who was in her office overseeing a meeting. When Margaret entered the lobby and saw Jordan, she didn't recognize him at first. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone brisk and professional. Jordan smiled and extended his hand. "I'm Jordan," he said, "the new owner of this building." For a moment, Margaret's expression remained neutral, but as the realization dawned on her, her eyes widened in shock. "You're the owner," she repeated, her voice filled with disbelief. "Yes," Jordan replied calmly. "Funny how things work out, isn't it?" What? Margaret sat in her office, her thoughts racing as the reality of the situation began to sink in. The boy she had once dismissed as nothing more than a nuisance now owned the very building she had ruled over for years. Her disbelief gave way to embarrassment as she replayed their encounter in her mind, remembering how she had humiliated him, called security, and ordered him to leave. At the time, she hadn't thought twice about her actions. To her, he had been insignificant, a nameless figure selling candy on the sidewalk. But now she realized the full weight of her mistake. The news of the building's new ownership spread quickly among the tenants and staff. Many were eager to see how Margaret would respond. Her reputation as a controlling and arrogant landlord had made her unpopular among the building's residents, and they were curious to see how she would handle being humbled in such a public way. Margaret tried to maintain her composure as she returned to the lobby to formally greet Jordan. She forced a smile, extending her hand in what she hoped would come across as gracious acceptance. "Congratulations on your success," she said, her tone overly formal. "It seems you have come a long way since our last encounter." Jordan, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, met her gaze with calm confidence. "Thank you," he replied, shaking her hand briefly. "It has been quite a journey. And I'll admit, I learned a lot from that day outside this building." Margaret's forced smile faltered as Jordan continued. "I realized then that I didn't want to let anyone dictate my worth or my potential. That experience taught me to channel my energy into building something meaningful." His words were calm, but they carried an undertone of quiet resolve that left Margaret feeling even more unsettled. As tenants began to gather in the lobby, curious about the exchange, Margaret's embarrassment deepened. It was clear that everyone was aware of the history between her and Jordan, and she could feel their judgmental stares. A few tenants even murmured words of congratulations to Jordan, their respect for him evident in their tone. Hoping to salvage her reputation, Margaret attempted to pivot the conversation. Well, I'm sure you'll find that managing a property like this comes with its own challenges, she said, her voice slightly shaky, but I'm confident you'll do well. Jordan smiled politely. Thank you for the advice, he said. I plan to make some changes around here, starting with fostering a more supportive environment for everyone. Margaret's stomach sank as she realized the subtle implication behind his words. Jordan wasn't just taking over the building, he was setting a new standard, one that stood in stark contrast to her own management style. She knew her actions had not only damaged her reputation, but had also left a lasting impression on those who had witnessed her treatment of Jordan. As the story of Jordan's rise and Margaret's reckoning spread, it became a viral sensation. Social media lit up with posts, videos, and articles recounting the dramatic turn of events. Clips of Jordan's calm yet powerful confrontation with Margaret in the lobby were shared millions of times with captions like, "The ultimate comeback and proof that hard work pays off." The public's reaction was overwhelmingly supportive of Jordan. People praised his resilience, determination, and ability to rise above the adversity he had faced. Many were inspired by his story, seeing it as a testament to the power of persistence and the importance of never giving up, no matter how difficult the circumstances. One post in particular captured the sentiment of the story. This is why you treat everyone with kindness. You never know who they'll become or what they're capable of. Kudos to this young man for turning humiliation into motivation and success. Jordan's story also sparked broader conversations about privilege, humility, and the way people in positions of power treat those they perceive as beneath them. Margaret became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of arrogance and the importance of treating everyone with respect. For Margaret, the experience was deeply humbling. She realized that her wealth and status didn't make her immune to accountability, and that her treatment of others had real consequences. While she initially tried to justify her actions to herself, the overwhelming backlash forced her to reflect on her behavior. Over time, she began to understand the importance of empathy and the impact of her words and actions on those around her. For Jordan, the experience marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. Owning the building wasn't just a personal victory, it was an opportunity to create positive change. Under his leadership, the property became more than just a place to live. It became a community. He implemented tenant-focused policies, ensuring that maintenance requests were addressed promptly and that residents felt heard and valued. Jordan also used his success to give back to the community that had supported him along the way. He launched mentorship programs for young entrepreneurs, sharing the lessons he had learned and helping others achieve their dreams. He often spoke at schools, community centers, and business events, using his story to inspire others to believe in their potential and pursue their goals with determination. Looking back on his journey, Jordan reflected on the day he had stood outside the building selling candy. "That day could have broken me," he said during a television interview. "But instead, it gave me the drive to prove to myself that I was capable of more. It wasn't about proving anything to her. It was about proving something to me." The story of Jordan and Margaret became a symbol of resilience, humility, and the transformative power of persistence. It reminded people everywhere that success isn't just about where you start. It's about where you're willing to go in and the work you're willing to put in to get there. And as for Margaret, her encounter with Jordan served as a powerful lesson. Kindness costs nothing, but the impact it leaves behind is priceless. In the end, she learned that the true measure of success isn't wealth or status. It's how you treat others along the way.